Happy New Year, guys. I hope you had a fantastic Christmas and New Year. Let's make this year a new great year. Focus on your dreams, focus on your goals. Welcome to the Purposeful Wisdom podcast. My name is Dawn Christine. As you guys know, I bring the best of the best on this podcast, and today is no different. I have the pleasure of welcoming Joshua Shea to the podcast. Joshua is a pornography addiction expert, certified betrayal trauma coach, therapeutic disclosure specialist, and the author of 4 books about pornography addiction, including I'm reading this book about porn addiction for a friend. Since 2018, Joshua has given more interviews about pornography addiction and betrayal trauma than anyone in the world. To date, he has internationally appeared on nearly 400 podcasts, television, and radio shows using his wealth of research and personal story to promote the ideas that porn addiction spans all demographics and those with a problem should seek help before it's too late. He also speaks extensively about the issue of working through betrayal trauma, especially with the partners of addicts and those who are facing infidelity. Prior to admitting his 24-year addiction to pornography in 2014, Joshua was a prominent magazine publisher, award-winning journalist, film festival founder, and politician in Central Maine. In 2017, Joshua launched PadAddictRecovery.com. He has also contributed articles about recovery to thefix.com and Recovery Today magazine, is a TEDx talk speaker, and has developed and presents a porn addiction educational presentation series for colleges, churches, libraries, and other groups. He's been sober since 2014, and he still lives in Central Maine with his wife and 2 children. Thank you so much, Joshua, for being here. Welcome in.
Thank you very much for having me. I appreciate it. And Happy New Year to you too.
Thank you. Let's make this year a good one, right? Let's start it off with a bang here. So I always like to start out with the story, the why behind the why. So can you share with my audience when you actually admitted that you were a porn addict, or how did this all develop for you?
Well, I've written 4 books, so we could be here forever. But the nutshell of it is that my pornography addiction was really not any different than a lot of people's. It was through trauma when I was a child, unresolved trauma that came from sexual abuse at the hands of a babysitter that I had around ages 3 to 8. And then also some mental abuse that came from my grandmother. I was able to just push that stuff down, not deal with it. And then when I was 12 years old, my older cousin thought he'd be cool, and he showed me a hardcore pornography magazine for the first time, and something happened to me. I did not take months, years to become an addict. I was an addict in the first 15 seconds that I saw it. I said to myself, this is something that is, I don't know what this is. I don't know why I'm feeling this way, but this is something that I've never felt before and is going to help me. The only other time I've ever felt that way was 2 years later when I got drunk at a wedding for the first time. And then from age 14 forward, I was a porn addict and alcoholic straight up until 36 years old. I didn't hide the alcohol well, but I hid the porn very well. Finally, when everything hit the fan back in early 2014, I got fired from my job because I was always drunk at it, despite the fact that I owned 1/3 of the company. The other 2/3 got rid of me, and there was a makeshift intervention, which was nothing like it looks on TV. And I recognized in that moment that all of the lying, all of the manipulating, everything that I had done in service of my addictions for the previous 2+ decades was over. I couldn't keep doing it, and I could either choose porn or alcohol, or I could choose a lifestyle that was quickly crumbling, but I still had time to save it. I chose to go to rehabilitation, first for alcohol. A few months after that, I went for the porn. And since then, I planned on writing one book at the very beginning, because I was a journalist and because there wasn't much out there. After I wrote that book, I got some messages like I thought I would, but I got a ton of messages from wives, girlfriends, mothers saying, "Oh my God, you fixed yourself," which was really not what happened, but you fixed yourself. How do I fix my husband? How do I fix my boyfriend? This was when I started to really do the studying on betrayal trauma, wrote my second book, which was the bestseller, He's a Porn Addict Now What, along with a friend of mine who's a therapist. And since then, I was doing lots of speaking. I thought that would be my way to go. Then the pandemic hit, and they didn't want you to come to the auditorium to speak because the auditorium was locked. And it turns out that people will attend virtual summits and virtual conferences. So the money in being a speaker is not there as it used to be. I had another friend who is a doctor who suggested during the pandemic I get into coaching one-on-one. And I was already writing a book, how pornography was changing. Online pornography in the industry was changing during the pandemic. And I realized that there was an opportunity for this. So I went and got my certifications from a few different organizations in pornography addiction, in betrayal trauma. And not too long ago, I finished up my certification as a therapeutic disclosure specialist. And now I basically, when I'm not glued to the computer, I'm living my life, but the rest of the time it is educating about pornography addiction and betrayal trauma, or I'm working with clients or couples one-on-one.
Wow, that's amazing. And I have to say, being on the opposite end of the spectrum here with that, I have been victimized from several different partners in my lifespan, that were porn addicts. Definitely, it definitely puts the betrayal, the trust, I had several partners, and looking at it in the mindset aspect of what I do now that, I've looked back on it, I started having my own theories about it. I definitely thought it was linked to some sort of child trauma for sure,
Absolutely.
but I also had a theory about it, like, well, it had to almost go back to maybe a belief system. And I'd love for you to see if I'm on a right path here, or they're coming in from the right direction of this. When I look back on my last relationship, it was a long marriage, and my ex-husband was a porn addict. And I found out about this as we were dating. I found out about this through when we were engaged. I had the belief that it was going to stop, that it was, just a phase. It was presented to me as, oh, I was single. I was in my single days, and, I'm having a hard time stopping. And I thought, okay, well, we're getting married now. We're going to be starting a family. Like, okay, well, now he has someone in his life, and, that'll just, phase out. And 4 years into our marriage, I literally caught him red-handed in the act. And I was 4 months pregnant with our daughter at the time. So the sense of betrayal came back of like, oh my gosh, like, why aren't I enough? Because I think that really goes through a woman's head, especially in a
That's the
committed
number one thing.
relationship.
That's the number one
Why?
thing.
And you go through all the things in your head. Like, it's not like we're not sexual. It's not like he's not getting enough sex. Like, what, like, why am I not good enough? Why is he looking outside the marriage? And this level of betrayal, just, it hits you so hard. Like, and then you start blaming yourself, role reverse, like, what did I do? What did I do that he went down this path? And after I did enough healing and I got into the line of work I'm in now, I started realizing that there's a deeper root, and it made me almost have this theory of, and men in particular, I am, stereotyping in this moment. When men have an addiction to pornography, I almost feel like they don't believe they're good enough in the relationship, and that's why they self-sabotage. Am I on something with that theory, or am I
No,
totally off the
you're
wall with it?
totally off base.
Okay.
if you look at the brain of a porn addict under an MRI machine, the closest addict's brain you will find is somebody who is a cocaine addict.
Wow.
This is what it does to your head. As somebody who was an addict for 24 years, I can tell you, and I think this is why I connect with a lot of my female clients who I deal with betrayal trauma, is because I was there, and I can honestly tell you it has nothing to do with you. If you realized how little we thought about you when it comes to our addiction, if you realized how little we thought about the family or how you're feeling or anything to do with that, because it has nothing to do with you. One of the things I ironically say to women who have men that are porn addicts, and right now, depending on what study you look at, it's between 15 to 20% of the male population does qualify as pornography addicts. It is about getting those chemicals. That's all it's about. It's about getting a dopamine rush, a serotonin rush, the endorphins. That started when the man or the woman, and if she happens to be a porn addict, starts very early in life. And way before, I was a porn addict at 12. I met my wife at 24. How could she have a damn thing to do with it? She didn't.
Right.
What the issue is that so many men are not porn addicts and are just kind of butt heads when it comes to caring about what their partner wants, that so many women love to say, oh, well, he's looking at porn, he's got to be an addict. And unfortunately, a lot of the time, that's not the case. If you genuinely have an addict as a partner, I almost think you're better off in some ways, because it has nothing to do with you, nothing whatsoever. But if he's not an addict, why does he not care what you think about pornography? Why does he continue to use it? That, to me, brings up even more difficult questions, because at least there's some science behind the addiction. And you're absolutely correct, Dawn. I see three things happening to my clients when they come to me for betrayal trauma. The first is, what did I do? Am I not pretty enough? Am I not good enough in bed anymore? What's wrong with me? What's changed about me that he needs to self-satisfy looking at other women? That's number one. Number two is, oh my God, who is this guy? If he can lie to me so well about this, what else has he been able to lie to me about?
Oh, yeah.
Does he even have the job that I think he does? He's told me about his family, but I haven't met every member. Does he have the same family that he really says? I cannot trust anything that has come out of this man's mouth from this point, from the moment we met to now, because if he lied this well about the porn, he could have lied about anything. Right. And then the final place that I see the biggest hardships with a partner of a porn addict is if the relationship has been together for a while. You've got a lot of partners who are like, well, if this was our second or third date and I discovered this, it would be out the door. But here we are 7 years into things, and we have a house payment, and we have 2 kids, and we have 3 pets, and we have 2 car payments, and neither of us can support this lifestyle on our own. I would be living like a pauper if I immediately walked away from this person. And what would happen with the kids on top of that? So what do I do now that I find myself in this place where I feel like, without knowing it, I painted myself into a corner? What do I do now? Those are really the 3 places that a client comes at me when it comes to betrayal trauma upon the first meeting.
Absolutely. And you hit the nail on the head. Everything that you just said has gone through my mind in my past marriage, for sure. I'd love for you to distinguish for me the difference between a porn addict and someone that's just, as you put it, not even giving a crap about the other partner's feelings. Because here's the thing, I know a lot of couples that I'm friends with that have agreed upon, you know what, they want to spice things up in their marriage. Porn itself is not a bad thing. if it, in my personal opinion, if two people in the relationship agree upon it and say, okay, you know what, we want to spice things up, we want to watch something tonight and spice up our love life. When two people are aware of it and could agree upon it with that respect and that honesty on the board up front, then it might not be a bad thing. But it's the sneaking behind the back, it's the betrayal, it's all these little things that conclude to what you just said, the I can't trust anything that's being told to me because I just don't know what to believe anymore. So distinguish these two paths for me of what an actual porn addict looks like to what someone that just doesn't care about your feelings, what does that even look like?
Well, again, let's remember that this is addiction, and addiction is addiction is addiction. Addiction has nothing really to do with the substance. It's not, somebody is not a food addict because it tastes so darn good. Somebody is not an alcoholic because boy, does beer taste good. Somebody is not a cigarette smoker because, man, this makes me look cool. And somebody is not a porn addict because, boy, it feels good down there. All addiction takes place up here, and it's largely the same thing going on. We form most of these addictions when we are young, or the roots are there, and it is because it is something that we learn helps us cope with trauma. And we learn and we go back to it again and again, whether it's a massive trauma or whether it's just I broke a wine glass on the floor. This sucks. I'm in a bad mood. So this is where I go when I'm in a bad mood. Being an addict of pornography is really like being an addict of gambling. It's like being an addict of video games. It's just that along the way, that was the medium by which grabbed hold of somebody. I was 12 years old. I was not getting into any casinos. I did not know where to go buy hard drugs. Nobody was letting me into any clubs so I could go dancing and get addicted that way. What else did I have to get addicted to when I was 12 years old than pornography? I think it was just easily accessible. And I think it did dovetail off of my sexual abuse, because I think the images I saw normalized what happened to me for the
Right.
first time. But I describe addiction as kind of like a Ritz cracker. Ritz crackers are great, tasty as anything, but they become so much better when you put a piece of cheese or pepperoni or peanut butter or whatever on top of them. The addiction is the cracker. That chemical reaction in your head when you are using your substance or behavior of choice, that's what you're after. You're after that topping. Most porn addicts who I coach, who have been doing it for more than even 5 years, don't care what's on the screen. Doesn't faze them in the least. It can be a guy, it can be a girl, it can be something in between. Doesn't matter the ethnicity. They are just there to generate the chemical reaction in their brain, because that's what they're looking for. There's no set of breasts, there's no genitals that are going, that's not what makes them feel better. It's the chemical reaction that hits in their head, and they just happen to know that it's pornography that delivers it. For some people, it's gambling. For some people, it's video games. For some people, it's drugs. It just happens to be pornography. And I think that when it comes to how it affects other people, pornography and sex addiction affects the partner probably harder and more personally than any other addiction. If you're a gambling addict, you're as a partner, you're not asking yourself if you are not pretty enough. If he's a video game addict, you're not feeling like, oh my God, I can never talk to this person, I can never look at this person in the eye, because we associate so much other crap with pornography. And that's where you get the guys who will tell you, I don't care what you think. This is, all guys do this, or this isn't real porn. The reality is 91.5% of men, and this is a post-pandemic statistic, 91.5% of men who use the internet worldwide look at pornography at least once a month. Worldwide for females, 60.2% of women who use the internet look at pornography at least once a month. I'm not anti-pornography whatsoever, or I'm not, at least in the message and when I bring things to people. You can talk about trafficking, you can talk about the morality of, looking at people's bodies. You can talk about all that stuff. I don't make that my argument, because I think that is not a black and white argument. That's an argument in grays. But there is a black and white argument to be made that somebody who is an addict does have a disease, and the disease just happens to be triggered by looking at pornographic images. That's really, I don't look at people who are sick with pornography addiction and draw any conclusions about them as a person. But when I'm dealing with a client who, unfortunately, I have to say, I'm sorry, I don't think your boyfriend or husband is a porn addict. I think he's just a butthead who doesn't care about you or care about your feelings. That's a very different set of circumstances. And usually that's when I ask to try to meet the guy or have them come in as a couple so we can talk and educate him about pornography addiction. One of the things I tell the partners is call up a podcast and have them listen to me. Go to my TikTok page and have them look at the videos. Ease them into the concept, because nobody wants to be told, hey, you're an addict, you do something bad.
Right.
The natural inclination is to push back and say no. So you need to ease the person into that concept. You need to, ease them into it safely. Let them know that they can talk about it, that it's okay, no matter how you feel about pornography, and then assess where he's at. And if it's just a matter of he's using it because he likes it, because it gets him off, then you have a completely separate set of issues to deal with, aside from addiction, which has very little to do with pornography itself. Yes, it involves naked people. Yes, the coup de grace is an orgasm at the end. But when it comes to sexuality with your partner, those are the only things they have in common.
Right. So what are some common signs or symptoms of an addict? How would one be able to, because I do agree it's not for us to finger point and say, because again, understanding that there's a why behind the why, and it does generally root to a childhood traumatic event, and obviously I understand this now looking back. What are some common signs and symptoms of an actual addict that people can be aware of, to where we can open this up for discussion and say, hey, let's sit down, let's talk about it, instead of this finger pointing that we all like to do?
First, look for isolation, and look for increased isolation when things are more stressful, when things have more anxiety. People's addictions tend to flare up when things are going worse. And I can look at my own timeline and see that myself. One of the reasons that people use pornography is because it gives a false sense of power and control. This is one of the reasons why people gravitate towards video games or gambling or food. These are process addictions. We're addicted to the entire process. We get dopamine during the entire process, versus something that's a chemical addiction, marijuana, meth, heroin, where just at that moment you're getting that fix. In being addicted to the entire routine, you can watch and see if their routines are changing. Also, you can bring up that one of the biggest telltale signs is asking somebody, do you have a pornography? Do you think you have a porn problem? Do you think you're using porn too much? And if they tend to go off the deep end or get really defensive, that's a telltale sign, because it would be like, and I'm going to assume you don't do heroin, Dawn. Let's not find out.
Just coffee.
Yeah, no, I get it. But if I came to you and I said, Dawn, you got to quit it with the heroin, you'd probably laugh at me.
Right.
But if I come at you and start quoting you the problems with caffeine, the problems with coffee, you might get a little bit more defensive.
Oh yeah.
You might start to, and I'm right there with you.
I get it.
People call, if you were to call me a heroin addict, I'd laugh at you. You call me a caffeine addict, maybe there's something still there to that.
Oh, I'd admit it wholeheartedly. I'm
Yep.
like, yep, I'm proud of it.
Yep. And so if that topic really irritates them, or if it's something they avoid, it's absolutely a telltale sign. Do they not take part in activities or see people that they once did? Are they staying away from people? Are they staying away from activities that were once more pleasurable? When it comes to, if you're a partnership, what's happening when you're not around? Most users will say the moment that their partner leaves, they're not even thinking about it as they're walking out the door, but within 5 minutes, their brain is screaming at them, they're gone, you can use now.
Yeah.
And it's not a matter of, ooh, I'm excited, now I get to look at some naked ladies. It's a matter of, here's my opportunity. My body and my mind are screaming at me that it needs these chemicals. I can tell you, after 20 years with both alcohol and pornography, there were times where I thought if I didn't get my fix of one or the other, that I was going to die, because that's what my body was telling me was going to happen. So I didn't care who I was, I didn't care if I was looking at a fat lady or a thin lady or a fat man or a thin man. When it came to the pornography, if it was going to do the trick for me that day, fantastic. Most porn addicts wish we could just push a button and not have to waste time with pornography, because it's not about the pornography. It's
about the
about
fix.
It's about the fix. It's like being a drug addict. You're just producing the drugs on your own. That's the big difference between someone that's an addict and not an addict. As far as being an addict, some of these specific symptoms for a porn addict, it's things like trying to find the perfect piece of pornography to finish your routine with, the piece that is going to give you the most dopamine. It is about losing time. Most people who look at porn will tell you that stories about they think they're sitting down and 30 minutes has passed and suddenly 2 hours is gone, or they just can't stop themselves because they haven't finished. Time becomes almost relative to a porn addict. And it's a bear. I mean, I can tell you that I was able to hide it very well, because if I could hide my dirty magazines from my mom, I could hide pornography addiction from anybody. And on top of that, I had alcoholism, so people could see that. When you're an alcoholic, you stumble, you slur, you smell. None of that happens when you're a porn addict. So it is very difficult to spot. Absolutely difficult. In couples with men, one of the telltale signs is erectile dysfunction of some sort.
Really?
Yeah. And
wow.
it's crazy. When I was 20 years old, and we're going back 25 years now, when I was 25 years old, when I was 20 years old, the average rate of erectile dysfunction in men my age was 2 to 4%. We are now, only 25 years later, erectile dysfunctioning is happening with men who are 20 years old 20 to 25% of the time. And I would tell you that probably 75% of my male clients who are under 25 years old have experienced some level of, and it's now its own term, porn-induced erectile dysfunction, PIED is what it's called. And it is hitting the young male population very hard. And it's one of these things, because it's naked people doing naked things, and because we are still very puritanical in how we treat ourselves, even if society is very liberally sexual, we don't talk about this kind of stuff with each other. We don't talk about this stuff out loud. But with those chemicals hitting your head, one of the side effects can be erectile dysfunction. And that is a big telltale sign these days.
So it's almost since it's a habit and it's habitual and it's too much almost, that it affects a male's stuff down there, like, because it's too much dopamine to the brain, and that
Not
really.
exactly. Not exactly. We know two things about the brain. Number one, it doesn't process images as well as we'd like to believe. This is why sometimes we can't tell if we're dreaming or we're having a real thing, or we have a memory and we don't exactly remember it. The brain does not process images as well as we like to think. It doesn't always know the difference between black and white and color. It doesn't always know the difference between a moving object and an inanimate object. And it also doesn't always know the difference between somebody on a screen and somebody in real life. We know that you get a dopamine hit every time you see a new piece of pornography. When you have new sexual imagery presented, you get a little burst of dopamine. This has been studied in several different species of animals, where the male of the species, if it's put together with a female, will absolutely mate, interact, go to town, and that will happen over a period of time, and then it starts to wane. It's just not as interested sexually in this same thing because it's experienced it again and again and again. However, you take out that rat that's been in the female rat that's been in there a long time, drop in a new one. It's not like the male rat is still tired. The male rat goes right back and wants more sex, it happens all over again. This is known as the Coolidge effect. And if you apply it to humans and you apply the fact that we can't always see the same imagery, imagine a man who he's going to have sex with his partner. If he's been married to her, let's say for 10 years, how many hundreds, if not thousands of times has he seen her naked? How many hundreds, if not thousands of times have they actually done the sex act? And frankly, if you've done it several hundred times, nothing new is going to happen. You know how this movie ends. However, you don't know how the movie ends on the screen. So there are plenty of men who, while they cannot get excited with their partner, they have no problem gaining an erection and finishing when they're looking at pornography because the dopamine is flowing. They have essentially fried their dopamine receptors with the pornography to the point that real life image of their partner naked and ready to have real life intercourse doesn't stimulate them enough to get an erection or to finish, whereas the new stuff every day does. That's why there's so much pornography out there. Most people never use the same pornography more than once because it does not give the same high. That just is the way science is. And that's why when people say, well, I like to, my wife or my girlfriend makes me sexy videos or sexy pictures. To me, that's the most dangerous thing because they stand the chance of just becoming another porn star in that person's head. And that's not helping anything. That's pouring gasoline on the fire.
Absolutely, I agree. And this obviously, I mean, myself included, this does affect relationships. You meet someone, you build a life with them, you start a family, you do all the things you're supposed to do, the house, the kids, all this stuff. And I even have had partners previous to my marriage where my boyfriends were addicted to pornography. And I often looking back and undoing the layers, there was also another addiction attached to it. I had a boyfriend way back in the day that not only was he addicted to pornography, but he was also an alcoholic. And now that I understand these things as an older adult and I'm in the field I am, you know, how what is the best course of action for this? Because, in one respect, I completely have empathy for addiction. Addiction is addiction is addiction. You're taking one, and if you stop one, you're replacing it with another, or sometimes there's a combination of addictions. So I definitely have empathy. But as the other person on the other end of the spectrum, what is the best course of action for this? Because I know that there's a lot of guilt and shame for some addicts. You know, they tend to hide it. That's why they hide it. There's guilt and shame around there. And that's why oftentimes addicts get so defensive, because they're trying to defend something and convince themselves that it's not an issue. And then there's deep down that guilt and shame in there. What does this even look like for, is there an opportunity for a healthy relationship out of all of this? What can the other partner do? How can they protect themselves? I know there's multiple questions I'm asking, but what does this look like as a whole? Is there any hope?
Absolutely, there's hope, and I am proof of it on both ends. You know, I was a pornography addict 24 years, alcoholic 22 years. And like you said, a lot of people who have a process addiction also have a chemical addiction. I think for me, it was a matter of one of them you can do in public, one of them you can't. And they served kind of the same masters, but it was just a matter of what I was needing that day. I can tell you that I have now been married nearly 21 years. My wife stuck with me during this time, thankfully. And my marriage right now is probably better than it ever has been. Now, of course, we still fight. Of course, we still have our bad days. And it's not like, the other thing I want to point out is, it's not like I have removed my heterosexuality. It's not like I've removed my sexuality. So many women are like, after a few months, he still looks at women. Well, of course he does. He's not gay. And that's the way that we're wired. Sexuality is a natural thing. You're not going to beat the sexuality out of them in recovery. It's a normal thing. But is it an obsessive thing? That's the biggest question. What I generally tend to do is I try to come at it from the point of view of recovery is a three-pronged process for the addict. First, it's getting the actual behavior of the addiction under control. That's not that difficult. I mean, how do you not look at porn? Well, you don't call it up on your phone. It's not that not doing it is hard. It's the urge
Starts
that you
here.
have to deal with, the urge you have to deal with, breaking up your routines. It's not that difficult to get somebody to stop that specific behavior or bring it way down. I usually tell people I can take down your pornography addiction activities by 50 to 75% within a month or two if you're serious about this. What needs to be looked at more than anything else as recovery, and this is true with betrayal trauma as well, because it's largely almost the same thing I do with my clients, is that we have to go and take that walk of trauma. What is betrayal trauma is never the first trauma in someone's life. To me, betrayal trauma is a 2020s way of saying my latest trauma from the last person I thought it would come from. Because most of the time that I deal with a wife or a girlfriend in a betrayal trauma session or in a betrayal trauma relationship is that it has more to do with old traumas than it does with the latest one. So whether it's someone dealing with betrayal trauma or the addict, we have to go back in time and figure out when this stuff started. How did it start? Why did it start? I believe that most of us follow a script that our parents or society give us. We are going to go to school, and then in high school, well, in high school, you better take some activities so you can get into a good college and, go to your prom and, be all nice. And then in college, you study hard for your white collar job. Somewhere around your junior year, you meet Mr. or Mrs. Right. And then 3-4 years after college, once you have been established in your nice white collar career, you get married and you have your 2.5 children and fluffy dog and pretty house. But the reality is that script that we're all given, almost all of us are thrown off of it between 16 and 22. Something happens. Something happens. Most people don't take over their script at that point. Most people just think, oh, well, my plans are done. I don't have any more plans. I'm just going to live life and whatever happens, happens, without realizing you've been writing the script the whole time. Maybe you just don't understand, you think you've been living a horror movie. Well, you wrote the script. This is a matter of going back and taking ownership of your decisions and understanding how your decisions affected your life. It's not just that, okay, well, you almost drowned when you were 6 years old and that caused trauma. Well, what did almost drowning at 6 do to you the rest of your life?
That's right.
How did it affect your life negatively? How was your life forever changed because of your trauma? That's what's more impossible or more important to recognize. For myself, I never did any of those typical teenage things like go skinny dipping or spin the bottle or any of that stuff. If I thought that stuff was going to happen, if I was in a group situation, I got myself out of that situation because it scared the hell out of me. Was I afraid of water? No, I swim just fine. Was I afraid of seeing my friends naked? No, I can guess what they look like naked, like every other person. And it was a matter of some kind of flight or fight reaction within me. Why was that happening? And why did that happen when friends wanted to go to strip clubs? Why did that happen in different situations in my life? Well, I had to go back and look at why it happened and rewrite the script for myself. And a lot of times, animosity that you have towards parents or siblings, different events, why you decided to go into some profession versus another. If you can go back, identify the trauma, and trace how it influenced your life, well, by that point, you are writing your own script. And once you really wrap your mind around the fact that you are the only one in control of your story, that's where we get to the final part of recovery, and that's who do you want to be moving forward and how do we get you there? Now, that can mean something like I want to be a healthier person, I want to be a more empathetic person, or it can be I want to be super rich.
Right.
It doesn't really matter. Now that you have a goal, you can write the script behind it because you've got all that mental junk known as trauma out of the way.
Absolutely. And I completely agree with all of that, because when I looked back on my own life and I realized that I had deep rooted trauma in my early childhood, and I was brought up to believe that I was never good enough and I was not pretty enough and I was never good enough to do anything. So there was my root now that I carried throughout my life. Of course, you have to own your own crap. You have to, because that's how you grow, that's how you learn. So when I looked at my last marriage as a whole, I was realizing, well, not only was he bringing trauma of his form into the marriage, but I also had deep rooted trauma in my form. The way my belief system was all screwed up, what I thought about myself, how I talked to myself. So we each bring parts of ourselves from childhood. We grow up having this belief system in our heads of what we think we are. And when I had to unpack all my own trauma and realize, okay, I was in a very dysfunctional household growing up. This is what I was taught to believe. I was told to believe, live through them and not for me and not have my own beliefs. And you grow up learning this. Of course, into my adulthood, I chose men that were not healthy for me. I chose men that had most of them addictions in some sort of way. I wanted to be rescued. I wanted to rescue them. I wanted to fix them. So it's all these things that I realized in my relationships of what brought to the table too. I didn't have the knowledge that I have now, and I've since gone through my stuff and worked my issues out and still continue to do, because I think healing it's evolutionary. You're always going to be healing, you're always going to be learning and growing. So with that said, once both partners recognize their own crap and their own traumas, and they want it to work, let's say they do want it to work, and the willingness, what does this even look like? How do you build trust moving forward? Because now you have one person that has been betrayed their whole lives. They have their own trauma. How do you even form trust moving forward? Because I feel like no matter what, it's always a trigger. There's always, because we're human, what does that even look like, of not continuing to wonder if what the other person is saying is actually the truth?
And this blows people's minds when I share this secret. You decide. You simply decide, I'm going to trust him now. I'm going to trust her now. You have to make that leap of faith. I always say, forgive, but don't forget if you want to try to keep the relationship together. Most women, when they come to me with betrayal trauma, they feel like they're at a place of being stuck. They're waiting for the lightning bolt. They're waiting for that magic sentence that unlocks everything. And that's just not the way it works. Hopefully he will make being a healthier, decent person a priority. And hopefully through his actions, you can recognize that's happening. And it would be easier for you to extend that faith and extend that trust. But we only decide, deciding you're going to trust somebody, we may feel like we don't make that decision on our own, but we absolutely do. We make all kinds of decisions in our life that we think are just hanging in the ether and just magically somehow happen. And ultimately, it has to come down to, we're going to try to make this work. We're going to try to do whatever our individual therapists or coaches want us to do. And we can also talk to somebody as a couples counselor. The one thing I would warn people about is to recognize that marriage counselors, couples counselors are not well versed in addiction. They're also not well versed in trauma. There is no marriage counselor that has ever cured a pornography addiction. They absolutely have their place, but you have to find the right professional who can help you. If you want to come to me and learn about ADHD and autism, well, good luck. You probably know more than I already do. I have this area that I have a personal experience, and I've dealt with hundreds of clients. I know my stuff here, and I'm willing to work here. Unfortunately, there are a lot of practitioners out there that need to keep the lights on, that need to, sort of become a jack of all trades because financially they have to. It's too bad, because if you see on somebody's, whether they're a coach or whether they're a therapist, if you see them having 20 specialties, that goes against the definition of specialty.
Right.
Absolutely. And know who you are going to see, and make sure, more than anything else, make sure you click with them. Just tell you a really ironic story. I was a journalist for nearly 25 years. I have no problem asking people very difficult questions, probably, and it sometimes blows up in my face in regular society when I ask questions that I shouldn't. But I'm in the right, being a journalist or being a coach is perfect when you like to ask personal questions.
Oh, yeah.
I'm very good at doing that. I'm very good at getting people to talk. When I was in my rehab for alcoholism, ironically, my case manager relapsed and ended up getting fired from the facility I was at. He ran a process group in the afternoons. The woman who was the coordinator of the entire facility came and asked me if I would run the process group. And I'm like, whoa, hey, dude, I'm here as a patient, not as somebody who works here. And
Right.
she said, yes, but I've met few people like you who can get a group to start talking immediately, or can get people to start spilling their guts immediately. It's clear you have expertise and experience asking questions, and a whole bunch. And the core of this, and I'll never forget her saying this, the core of this is just getting people to start talking. Once they start talking on their own, a lot of stuff, it becomes obvious. And you've talked with clients where, so what's going on? Oh, not much. And then they tell you some horror story of when they were 14. And it's like, okay, I know what we're talking about today, even if they didn't know coming in. All you have to do is have a good ear. And if you click with somebody, I don't care what diploma they have hanging on their wall. I don't care how many years they have doing this. If you can talk to somebody who you feel safe with, who you can be vulnerable with, who you can trust as a guide to get you to places in your mind that you've never been before, that's really what you need. That's ultimately
Right.
what's going to get you there. And I'm very proud that many of my clients, as I'm sure yours do, at the end of a session say, wow, this was better than therapy. And it's like,
Aha moments. I love
because
it. Yeah.
you may not react to the way that a therapist works well. I always
Right.
tell them, what's the difference between you and a therapist? I say, well, a therapist will tell you what's 2 + 2. Oh, you don't know? Okay, well, let's think about that. How do
Right.
we get to what 2 + 2 is? And okay, well, our time is up. I want you for the rest of the week to think about 2 + 2 and how
Right.
you'll arrive at that answer. Where my style as a coach, if I say what's 2 + 2 and it takes you more than 30 seconds to answer, I'm going to tell you, damn it, it's 4. Let's move on.
Right.
That's
Right.
my style. I'm very
Right.
blunt. I'm very in your
Me
face.
too.
I'm not everybody's cup of tea, but for those people who click with me, they don't care whether I'm a brain surgeon or a homeless guy. They
Right.
care that I can click with them and that they feel comfortable and that they can heal with me. Because at the end of the day, it comes down to number one, deciding you're going to heal. If you
Yes.
don't decide you're going to get better, you're not going to get better.
Choices. Absolutely. And that's why I do what I do, because a lot of us in all these different fields of healing, emotional, mental, physical, because it is a trifecta. And I always say that on my podcast here. It starts with mindset. It starts with the choices we make. You can either woe is me and be in this depleting energy of, oh, I'm a victim, or you can pull yourself out of victim mode and take control of your life and decide enough's enough and make that conscious choice to shift, right? And then once we make that shift, but it goes back to, that's one of the reasons why I became a coach too. It's really, especially that you're relatable. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Most, and I respect the therapists out there. I respect the doctors
Yep.
with degrees. I do.
I couldn't
But
have done that
there's
much
a
school.
right. But when you have someone that's really been there, lived it, done it, knows what works, knows what doesn't, there's a sense of rapport there
Yeah.
that is unlike any other, because you're relatable. You understand deep-heartedly where that person is coming from. You can recognize things because you also recognize them in yourself too. Like, oh, I know what that pattern is. I can relate to that. Okay, this is what didn't work for me. So I'm going to, teach you what does work. Like, don't waste your time, and shifting that mindset. So that's what makes, because I get asked that all the time. What is the difference between a coach and well, we're going to move beyond the trauma. We're like, for me, it's like, okay, we're going to shift mindset. We're going to start creating new belief systems, because I want you to detach from that. I want you to break that chain of trauma. I specialize in trauma, but I'm not a doctor. So if they're going to diagnose you, leave that to them. I'm going
Yeah.
to work on the aftermath. What that's the old you. That happened to you a lot. So let's not carry that in. Let's build a new foundation. So we are relatable in that way. And a lot of people don't understand that we become coaches because we've gone through these things. We understand wholeheartedly what it affects a marriage. It affects any kind of relationship. It affects ourselves. And we're like the spokespeople, so I get that. And, I love the fact that you and your wife have overcome and continue to overcome these obstacles, because I hate when people say, oh, well, you never can. It never, it can't be resolved. You're a prime example that it can, because you both wanted it to.
Right.
That's the difference. You can want something all you want, but it really takes two in a relationship. And if you want it as much as you want it, and the other person isn't willing to do the work to make it work, then you're grasping at straws. Then it's time to move on and go your separate ways. But the fact that you wanted change and you wanted this to work, a prime example of that. If you want something bad enough and you want to fix it and want to start fresh and choosing to shift that, anything could last if you really want it to. So I love
Right.
that.
And while I know that this happens with most people, in 9.5 years of recovery, I've not relapsed once. And that's
That's amazing.
because at the very beginning, I said, I'm not going to relapse. That doesn't mean I had massive triggers. That doesn't mean I had massive urges. I still, at football season, want to drink. I don't watch football very much anymore because it has been a trigger that I can't put behind me.
Right.
Thankfully, the Patriots turned to crap right around that time, so I don't have to.
Ah,
I don't have to worry about it as much. But that's exactly the thing. You have to be able to look at yourself in the mirror and own it. I always
that's
tell
right.
people, most people in their bathroom have a big mirror opposite the shower. You open the curtain and you get out of the shower, you are not going to see any more raw version of yourself than there you are naked.
That's
And
right.
what is it you see? If you see a conquering hero that the world is lucky to have, and that you're ready to go and fight the forces of evil and let us all bask in your glory, well, you are probably very delusional. And if you also step out and you see the biggest piece of crap who shouldn't even be alive, who brings nothing to the table, who nobody loves, well, that's the other side of the spectrum. And you're probably delusional there too. It's
Right.
somewhere in the middle is where we are. And you have to get to truly know who you are, understand yourself, and own your stuff. I
That's
had a,
right.
I had a client the other day who was telling me how he hasn't used marijuana in 6 or 8 weeks, but he's going to Miami in a couple of weeks and he's going to take a break while he's there and use marijuana. But that doesn't count. And it's like, okay, well,
Okay.
what if you were a serial killer and you stopped killing people, but then you decided for 2 weeks you were going to? Yeah. And that's kind of the thing is a lot of this is that we have to learn that we are the stories we tell ourselves
That's right.
and that we need to tell ourselves a different story if we're going to change.
That's right. Joshua, thank you so much. I would love, because, I have a lot of listeners that listen to this as they're driving and they're not actually watching the video content of it. Where can people
That's
reach
too
out
bad
to
because
you?
we are some good looking people.
I know. Oh, please. I know. I get it. Trust me. Like, and that's confidence. That's not cockiness, by the way.
No, no, that's all fact.
Where can people reach you for those who are listening while they're driving and they're not able to watch the video offhand? Where can people reach out to you if they need your help in any way, shape, and form with us?
Yeah, you can reach me through my website, which is the letter P and then the words addict recovery, because nobody likes to type the word porn into a search engine. It's
This is true.
it's paddictrecovery.com, or you can find me on Instagram or TikTok with the handle that corn coach. Corn because we can't say porn online because we're not
Correct.
grown-ups enough yet to say that word out loud. So it's that corn coach, Instagram or TikTok, or my website, P Addict Recovery. Any questions you have about my books, about my coaching, anything else, those are the resources to follow.
Awesome. And I can't thank you enough for sharing your story and definitely educating me on the topic too. And there was some sense of closure for me as well. Some of my questions were definitely answered today. And I hope that, this brought enlightenment to my audience, especially if they're going through similar things right now in their lives. They have someone who really understands, who really gets it, who can really help and hopefully mend some relationships and heal themselves, both aspects, not only in pornography addiction, but also in the trauma side for both people involved. So I can't thank you enough for being on here today.
And thank you so much for allowing me to be here. I appreciate it.
Oh, absolutely. Guys, thank you so much for viewing this, for watching this. Don't forget to subscribe, to like, to share this video with others that you may feel needed. And I will see you on the next episode. Take care and be well, guys. Thanks.